Hello everyone and welcome to Celebrating Cinema. I'm your producer Elliot Bloom, today joined by filmmaker Kiriko Mechanicus.
Hello.
And today we are going to take a look at the film of Jacques Tati, Playtime, but ask a question to do with attention. So as you may or may not know, Jacques Tati's 6 classics are now being screened here in a 4K restoration. And we wanted to ask, what's the cost of paying attention? We are constantly told to pay attention, to slow down, to be present, to notice the world around us. But what if paying attention is not always a gift? Today, we are looking at 3 extraordinary films that ask us what happens when we finally see our lives clearly. Jacques Tati's Playtime finds freedom in paying attention. Akira Kurosawa's Ikiru discovers the devastating cost of noticing too late. And Martin Scorsese's After Hours ask us what happens when you cannot stop seeing. Together, they ask the difficult question, is paying attention the path to a richer life or the thing we spend our lives avoiding? But first, Kiriko, how have you been? What have you been up to? What have you watched?
I have been good. It is summer in the Netherlands. I mean, it's summer everywhere, but it's hot.
Not in Australia.
Not in Australia. It's cold out there right now. We just had Pride. It was fantastic. And on the last day of Pride weekend, so last Sunday, I ended the Pride celebrations in the most perfect way by watching the Gospel according to St. Matthew by Pier Paolo Pasolini, which is the telling of the life of Lord Jesus Christ from his birth to his resurrection, according to Matthew. But I have to say, I was deeply moved, deeply touched. It is an incredible it's showing Jesus in a very new light. All the text in the film itself is the actual literal gospel as it is written in the Bible.
So it's not changed in any way. It's not a script.
It's not changed at all. It's actually, I learned this recently, the favorite film about Jesus Christ by the Vatican. Like,
wow.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
And then
made by a gay man as well.
Made by a gay, radical, anarchist, communist, fantastic man. Yeah, they were originally very afraid that he would like bash them hardly, but then they loved it and they still do.
Damn.
It's this beautiful, it's kind of gay also. Like all the men are so gorgeous. Jesus is also kind of like gorgeous and like hot, and you just look at him from Pasolini's point of view. But then knowing that Pasolini is a communist, it's a very communist telling of how Jesus was actually the first communist, or at least that's how I saw it, in the world, and how he sort of spreads his word of, sharing. And it was very inspiring. And then, of course, Pasolini, for his films, he does street scouting. So he just goes out on the street and looks for interesting faces. And they're just so beautiful to look at. It's like, on one side, this very inspirational story, and on the other side, it's also kind of like a documentary on Italian life, because you just look at these faces and the depth that they contain, because they have no pretense, they have no, self-awareness of being on screen. So you can just look at it endlessly. And then, I don't know, I remember for this podcast, I had the privilege once to talk with one of my favorite film directors, who's Tarsem Singh, who directed a film called The Fall. And I remember in this conversation asking him if he had any inspirations for The Fall. And he said at the time, The Gospel by Pasolini. And it's only now, like 2 years later, that I got to see it. And it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah?
Yeah. If you love The Fall, I would highly recommend watching The Gospel as well.
And listening to the conversation you did with him.
Yeah, it's a fantastic conversation. I re-listened to it yesterday. It's really good.
And because you're not religious, are you?
Maybe I am now, I have to say.
Whilst wearing a Buddhism t-shirt.
Yes. No, I wouldn't say I'm not religious, like as a statement or like so firmly, but Jesus Christ never spoke to me.
Yeah.
It's interesting to see such a pure and honest telling of his story, which for me at least is like very far from how the Vatican shows him, or how Christianity as an institution has always told his story.
Would you say in some ways, obviously I haven't seen it, but maybe normalizes is the wrong word, but it takes sort of like the mystique away from it and sort of just
Totally. It's like this black and white handheld. It's just a guy. It's just a gorgeous guy with some wisdom.
Yeah.
It's kind of how I see Pasolini as well. So. And then Mary is played by his mother.
Really? Wow. The film that I saw recently is The Swimmer by Frank Perry. Do you know about this film?
Never heard of that film.
So it stars Burt Lancaster, and it's this very like, I described it as like a suburban man with a suburban sized dream. The whole idea is that he's at his friend's house that has a swimming pool, and he's enjoying swimming, and he's a bit of a womanizer and all of this. And he gets this idea in his head that he can swim all the way back to his house by going through everybody else's a neighborhood of swimming pools. Yes. So then you just follow him on this kind of, it becomes almost surreal at some point, because he will just sort of like meander his way to the next garden with someone's swimming pool. And sometimes he will ask for permission. Sometimes he'll just jump in and swim. And you kind of, through this device, you get to understand a bit more about who he is and whether the people in the neighborhood like him or not. He's trying to get back home to his wife and kids, but the whole idea is that he has some kind of like forced amnesia of how his situation is at home, because like I said, he's a bit of a womanizer, and so you meet all these women who are sort of falling at his heels and that he's had at some point an affair with, and you kind of sort of see the sleaziness of him and how he upholds an idea of himself as a father, but everybody else around him challenges it.
It sounds like a better version of the Odyssey. Just a man in water, forgetting his wife and kids.
Seduced by women. Yes. That's true. That's a really good point. I mean, I guess that's why Tom screened them next to each other. But yeah, I mean, at some point you get bored by it, but I think it's very much intentional. Like, it drags a lot of the time, and I loved how committed Burt Lancaster was to the bit of being so passionate and driven to swim in every pool that it almost breaks him at some point. And the scene at the end where he returns home is, quite harrowing actually, because to kind of give away the ending, it's an empty house, it's an abandoned house.
Dang.
Yeah, that stuck with me, I think.
I really love when films hyper focus on the silliness of life.
Yes.
Or like find missions in like the dumbest things, because we come to the cinema to like see the tragedy of life and death and like, I don't know, but day-to-day life is very much the opposite also. And also life and death contains within these micro missions. Yeah.
I also thought it's such like, obviously it sounds very silly, but it's also a very simple way of telling like American suburban life and just how like kind of artificial it all is of itself. And you see all the wants and needs that these people have, but it's very much contained to the world that they're in or forced to exist in.
Neat.
Nice that you say about noticing these small things, because we're going to be talking about attention. I've written a little cold open.
Nice. Bring back the cold opens.
Yes, please.
Also, it's a warm open. Like, we changed that.
Yeah.
So
we need a better name for it. I've been thinking a lot about attention while preparing for this episode, partly because I find it increasingly difficult to give anything my full attention. Even writing this, I probably checked my phone a few times, switched between apps, scrolled a little bit. I found other things to do. And at home, when I try to watch a film, I'm increasingly aware of how difficult it can be to just sit there and watch it without reaching for something else. And I think that's one of the reasons I keep coming back to cinema. Going to cinema is one of the rare experiences we still have where we're asked to give ourselves over to something for a couple of hours. You sit in a dark room with a group of strangers, and for a while, you agree not to do anything else. You can get bored, your mind can wander, you can even dislike what you're watching, but you're not immediately given another thing to look at. And I think that's quite radical now, sadly. We're living in a world where our attention is constantly being competed for, measured and sold, but I think the problem goes deeper than our phones. The films we're talking about today were made long before the attention economy as we understand it, and yet they're all concerned with what happens to our ability to look and to live when we're caught inside the structures of modern life. Because modernity changed the rhythm of our lives. We moved from a world organized around the sunrise and sunset into one organized around clocks, timetables, working hours, public transport, office hours. Cities became these enormous systems that demanded that we move according to their rhythms. And bureaucracy, work, and capitalism introduced another layer to that. We're constantly being asked to process, produce, arrive somewhere, complete something, move on to the next thing. And I think cinema has been fascinated by that transformation almost from the beginning. You can see it in the way filmmakers increasingly move away from the countryside and into the city. The city becomes this new environment we have to learn how to navigate, full of crowds, machines, traffic, offices, systems, and strangers. And there's something quite strange about the fact that the modern city is designed to make everything more efficient. And yet so many films about modern life are about people who feel completely lost inside it. That's why I think Playtime, Ikiru, and After Hours become really interesting together to look at. Tati's Playtime is almost the ultimate film about this constructed modern world. He actually built his own version of Paris, Tativille, an enormous artificial city of glass, concrete, offices, restaurants, and traffic, and then lets us watch the people trying to move through it. And what I love about the film is that Tati doesn't simply tell us that modern life is alienating. He makes us look at how strange it is to actually exist inside these spaces. People don't quite know where to stand, they walk into doors, they get into each other's way. They're constantly being directed by architecture, traffic, and systems that seem to have been designed to make everything function perfectly. And yet the people in the background, the workers, waiters, doormen, cleaners, are constantly having to improvise to keep this perfect world functioning. Then Kurosawa's Ikiru takes the same modern system and brings it down to one man's life. Watanabe has spent 30 years inside bureaucracy. He processes papers and follows routines. He has a job but almost no sense of life outside it. And it takes the knowledge that he's dying to make him suddenly look at the world differently, which raises this incredibly uncomfortable question: why does it take the possibility of death for us to recognize that we're alive? And then After Hours takes the city in a completely different direction. Paul Hackett is an ordinary man moving through New York after work, but the city gradually becomes this impossible maze. Every encounter becomes significant. Every detail seems to demand his attention. The systems and routines that usually organize urban life begin to collapse around him. Tati asks what happens when we actually start looking at the world we've constructed. Kurosawa says what happens when we suddenly realize that our lives are passing inside those structures. And Scorsese asks what happens when we're forced to pay attention to absolutely everything. And I think that's where this becomes more than simply talking about mindfulness or screen addiction. Because maybe we're not just distracted because our phones are distracting us. Maybe distraction is also built into the way modern life works. Maybe bureaucracy, work, cities, and capitalism give us endless things to process precisely so that we don't have to stop and ask what we're actually doing with our lives. And perhaps that's why cinema can still be such a powerful space. A filmmaker can take this world that we're moving through without really seeing it and make us stop. Tati can make us notice the person in the background. Kurosawa can make us notice the years disappearing. Scorsese can make us notice every terrifying detail of a single night. Whether attention is really something that simply makes our lives better, I'm not sure. But paying attention might be liberating. It can be painful, and it can even be unbearable. And maybe these films are asking something more difficult than how do we pay better attention, but instead asking what happens when we finally do.
Beautiful words, Elliot. While I was watching these films and sort of preparing to think about this attention economy, I mean, the rise of the bureaucrat and office life it started more or less the same time that cinema started, no? However, it's a very rare arena, I think, that appears in cinema because I guess as humans, we just want to watch the Odyssey and the adventure and, you know, the heroes and the big stories. Whereas I think the life that is described in these films is the daily life of, I don't know, most people that watch movies. It's like kind of anti-entertainment, or I think films that are very critical of what entertainment is and how, you know, going outwards and looking at the Odyssey is also in a way directly not implicating the Odyssey in your own life because you're outsourcing it instead of looking for adventure in your day to day. And I realized now that the three films that we're gonna talk about are each from a different era. So Ikiru is from the 50s, Playtime from the 60s, and After Hours about the 80s. So maybe it would be nice to talk about them chronologically and also put them in more of like a historical perspective.
Yeah. And I wanted to maybe just add so on the one hand, of course, you're right that in cinema, we're perhaps more obsessed with these bigger, grandiose stories that take us outside of the worlds or lives we live in. But then also what I find interesting is that, like I kind of mentioned, is you also see cinema moving into the city, but they're much more noirish, or there's much more about sort of like fictionalizing our suspicions and fears of the anonymity of the people around us, of turning them into some kind of villain or someone to fear of because we become so alienated with them. And I think these films kind of take all of that out and really make you just sit within the world as it is, and rather than trying to heighten it in such a way. Obviously, Scorsese takes you on a bit of a surreal dream, but I think it's much more mundane, these films, I would say.
Yeah, for sure.
Should we start with Ikiru
Yes.
by Kurosawa? Do you want to explain a bit about this film?
Yeah, sure. So Ikiru is a film from 1952. And Kurosawa, who is mostly known for his actually big, grandiose samurai stories, made a film about a bureaucrat whose name is Watanabe. He is, I think, works at like city council or something for his entire life. And basically every day what he does is he receives requests from people to, improve city infrastructure, or, people who wish that there would be a playground for their children in their local neighborhood. And as a good behaving bureaucrat does, he declines every single request because, of course, he's not the only one responsible. Bureaucracy is a system where nobody really takes responsibility for anything because there's so many bureaucrats who, are not able to make a decision that is out of the ordinary. And you can see how this has affected his joy of living that has, I would say, disappeared because it limits his capacity to fantasize, to, go on an adventure, to really enjoy life as it is, and how his desk life has really chained him to the law of order. And the film shows how this one person, a young woman who is this playful, cuckoo girl, I would say. She's like the manic pixie dream girl before she was there. Changes his way of living through, going against the law in very small ways. And then by doing this more and more, he loosens himself up, and then he starts to see that there is possibility beyond bureaucracy. And he starts living. And that's the story of Ikiru, which means living in Japanese. I think this is my favorite Kurosawa film.
I think so too. It's funny because like you said, he makes these big, grand, epic films, and kind of similar to David Lynch, who makes, again, very specifically surreal but also grandiose films. My favorite film from him is also The Straight Story, and they're both about the mortality of life and like this realization or awakening of how precious time can be, but it's not necessarily, you don't feel lectured to or told to see it such a way. You feel it really through the characters, through Watanabe, and how that realization of like right at the end of your life, you only just realize what it is to feel alive is must be such a insane feeling to witness or to go through, or to feel like your time has been wasted. But then the thing that I was fascinated with Ikiru, and I couldn't figure out the whole time, is like, also with our lives, we're always working out what the meaning of life is. And sometimes it can be these really big ideas that we may think of, and for others, it may be the job that we do. And I think with Ikiru and what Kurosawa shows, it's much more about what we choose. And it's just as simple as that. And it's how whatever meaning we as people want to give to our own lives, rather than, because I think like Ikiru says, it means living. That's what life is. There is no meaning to life in the end. It's whether we want to ascribe meaning to it or not.
Right.
It's therefore our decision of what that meaning can look like, rather than it having to be something that is determined by society or the people around us.
Yeah.
And it becomes so simple because he's like, oh, of course I want to build this playground for people because that's something I want to give, or it's through the actions rather than the ideas or the conversations, maybe, let's say.
I think also the film is a great testament on regaining responsibility over your own life.
Yeah.
Because I think the way we think about bureaucracy and about laws and our place within society, if I speak on myself, I sort of decline the notion of understanding how it works. Like, I don't care for understanding the tax system because I'm like, what can I do about it? You know, I just obey. Whereas, of course, if you were to actually understand it, you know, see it as something that is part of your own life and also as your responsibility in society, you realize that there is a way to challenge these things. And it's kind of sad how we've come to not see them as important or relevant or interesting, because in the end, stories of life and death, all the, you know, big hero stories that we long for, they actually belong, strangely enough, in this world, because decisions are made not through the Odyssey stories. They're made on paper by law, by governments, by bureaucracy, and also, you know, what happens with our tax money. So I think because it is so unattractive, or it has been made so unattractive, it is only more important to really see how there lies power and decision and also meaning of life. Like, in the end, it is there that we are able to create change in a way. It is, it's something that I've been thinking about a lot lately, because I realize that I'm also taking my hands off of this thing that seems so big to me. But I think especially Ikiru shows how there's, in a way, beauty in bureaucracy because it is man-made and can be challenged.
Why do you think Wantabe is not able to see that until his own mortality is shown to him?
I think because none of us see it, no? I mean, there is something so satisfying in finding structure and order in a structure that has already been created for you. I mean, there is nothing more scary than being lost in a maze of trying to find out what this meaning of life is. And when a structure is presented to you, it gives you some sense of comfort, you know? It's routine. There's also something very comforting about not having any responsibility, I would say, because it's an easier way of living that comes with no risk. So in that sense, I mean, we're all complicit in that way. I mean, don't we all kind of do that to some extent?
Yeah.
It's also a beautiful reminder, the film, how change is very small decisions. We once had a conversation about this phenomenon that is called anarchist calisthenics.
Oh, yeah.
And this film is, in a way, a demonstration of that. It's this thing that people exercise where they show small forms of resistance of anarchy in their day-to-day by, for example, not paying for public transport because they believe that it should be free, or, you know, these type of things that go against society. And I feel like Watanabe in this film, he kind of starts exercising these small things that are like the choices that are not expected from him, and finds freedom in that. It's kind of corny, but it's like, oh, damn, this is what life is about. It really gives you that satisfaction.
It's corny, but it's obvious. Like you said, it comes back to stuff. We're talking about Nolan's Odyssey too much. But this idea of that that we look for heroes in these sort of like big ways, or also if you take a more macro look at it, that we're always kind of waiting for someone else to tell us what to do, whether that's for some kind of revolution or for a new political figure to take charge and be the person we put all our hopes and dreams into. And this film really shows you that it's within your own power, within your own world, within your own day, and it can start with yourself and with the job that you have, both for yourself but also for others. There's always a way that you can help others through your own means. And that seems like the most radical place to start.
And maybe we're also brainwashed in that way, you know? Like, I mean, the Odyssey is like over 2,000 years old and we're still like so obsessed with it. And I mean, essentially all of entertainment, not all, but a lot of entertainment has been a repetition of this same fucking story, which is already over 2,000 years old. So somehow in our subconscious, we're indoctrinated that this is our savior.
Yeah.
That this is the way that the world will change through like big gestures.
Yeah. We need a Christ-like figure.
Yeah, we need someone else to come and save us. Whereas, you know, that it's not really realistic. Who knows? But but I think as for now, I think bureaucracy is there's really something there for us.
Yeah. But I think it's interesting because we're doing this in chronological order, but that out of the three films, this is the more hopeful film, and this is the more like radical in a way, I guess. If it's 1950s, it's obviously just after the Second World War, the dropping of the atomic bomb of Japan. And so maybe there's a feeling there with Kurosawa that it's much more within this urban life that we can kind of change the narrative or recreate things. But then, and that feels maybe kind of fresh, let's say.
Yeah.
And then if you move already to the 1960s with Jacques Tati's Playtime, that's already a lot less hopeful, a lot less grey, and yeah,
it's only
miserable.
Becoming worse and worse.
Yeah.
You saw Playtime yesterday in the cinema, yeah? Do you want to talk about it?
Yeah. So Playtime is from 1967 and it's by the French auteur Jacques Tati. And if people don't really know his films, he's much more about physical movement and he shows comedy through that. He's kind of very much inspired from the people of like Buster Keaton, Charlie Chaplin, these silent actors. Jacques Tati actually started out as a mime artist. And Playtime itself is set in a lifelike size city that resembles Paris, which he built himself. He basically mortgaged his house. He took out as many loans as he could and went bankrupt making this film, basically. The crew on the film called this city Tativille. It's hard in some ways to explain the film because there's almost no plot to it, but you follow a character called Monsieur Hulot, which is kind of this reoccurring character in all of Tati's film. He's always the protagonist. The very simple idea is that he's arrived at an office to give papers to someone. You don't know who this person is or what the papers are. And in that, he gets stuck in this kind of like corporate urban maze of trying to find the person to get him to give the papers to. And then it just unravels into moving through this facade of Paris from day to night to morning and all the kind of encounters that he meets on the way. And it's really about how you move through this constructed concrete place and how awkward it is to do so. And because of Monsieur Hulot's character, where he doesn't really say much, you really see it in his awkward physical movement of how difficult it is actually to just be in this place, of how to make real connections, of constantly feeling trapped within places. There's a very funny moment where he's left his friend's apartment, but he doesn't know how to get out of the building itself. And so he's stuck there for what feels like 20 minutes within the film, and time passes. And it's all these things that often the easy narrative of it is that it shows you how alienating these sort of concrete urban jungles are. But I feel Tati is really trying to show you more how it's about, obviously, how constructed it is and artificial and the facade of it, but how unnatural it is for humans to exist in these spaces. And although he shows you that when these places fall down, or there's this stretch of sequence in a restaurant, basically, where they have just constructed the restaurant and everybody's going to now eat at the restaurant. It's a very fancy place. And as they are eating throughout the night and dancing, the whole place is slowly falling down. And it's kind of this thing of how the rich upper class are continuing as if everything is normal, or trying to improvise and make the most of it. But then you see all the people in the background, like I said, the cleaners, the builders, the waiters, trying to sort of maintain this illusion of normality, or this idea of perfection that these cities try to project out onto us.
Mm-hmm.
It's a film that I've been thinking about a lot since I've watched it. And just because I think there's so much to it, if we bring it back to the idea of attention, is the idea that Tati really constructed this whole city to then make you choose where to look at. It's not like he tells you what to look at. So it's a lot of long shots or wide shots also. And there you really have the frame for yourself to look at all the awkward background characters, extras, the weird placement of posters or buildings and this kind of stuff, that it can be quite liberating but also overwhelming in a way. I don't know how you found it to watch.
Well, I haven't seen this film in the cinema, which I'm excited to do because it is, dare I say, an impossible watch on your laptop.
Yeah.
Like, talking about attention, I don't think I've ever been challenged as much as with watching Playtime on my laptop, because it's kind of like the same experience as watching out of your window.
Yes.
Which you can only do for me, unfocused millennial girl. I can only do for, a number of minutes. To go through that for, what is this film, like 2 hours or something? It really requires a meditative state that I don't think I'm ready for. However, I firmly believe that if you watch this in the cinema, it will give you all these beautiful insights that you can already see are there, but, to really feel them, I would love that. Also because one thing that I find so fascinating with constructed walls and this constructed city that Tati has made is that you, of course, recognize it as your own environment. If you live in a big city, you see like, oh yeah, this is, the corners and the walls and the buildings that I'm surrounded by. But it gives you also this other layer of visualizing the walls that you can see in society. I was thinking about when you try to, in the Netherlands, reach the tax office, the Belastingdienst, which is like an impossible task because you have to write them and then you call them and then you're waiting for like 35 minutes and you get someone on the line and he's like, I'll redirect you to another person, and then you have to wait for another 15 minutes and they're like, oh yeah, I can't help you, so I'll write you an email and then here's the reference, and then, you're in a process that will easily take you weeks, if not months. Probably this is a universal experience, by the way. Yeah. But it's this absolute frustration of not being able to encounter another human in this, very essential way of surviving, because it's very important for us to be able to understand what our rights are within this bureaucracy. You feel the immediate frustration of this guy just not being able to hand over these papers to wherever they need to be. And in a way, it's beautiful to recognize the walls of a city as the walls that hinder you from doing the thing that you actually have to do. It offers a new way of looking at the city because you realize that that's actually what a wall does. A physical wall divides you from meeting the person that you have to meet.
Yeah. The idea that he doesn't say so much throughout. He does speak at times, but it's so minimal that, if he was made silent, then you could say like it's an emphasis on something. But the fact that his dialogue is really just restrained to like few sentences and stuff really shows how passive he is and how much the city forces him to, or dictates how he moves and engages with people. And you really see that. And I think it's quite brilliant because all the interactions are very brief. There's no moment to really stand still and catch up with someone because you're either swarmed by crowds of people moving through, or the traffic then turns green so then you can cross, and these kinds of things. That it's relentless. It never stops. And I think the fact that you go from day to night to morning also shows that this place is almost meant to trap you within itself rather than for you to play within it or to break out from it.
It gives you a better understanding of what we call civilization, because you see how structured and choreographed and created only every movement is, but also everything that we wear and how, you touch another person or how you walk down the street or what you think is expected from you. So when you look at the film, you're really like, we're all just like a bunch of monkeys who are told that this is how we're supposed to behave. So I guess that's what we'll do, but it's actually not bringing us anywhere.
Because everything is more made of glass rather than like concrete a lot of the time, and so you see reflections always, so either of the Eiffel Tower or the Arc de Triomphe, and so he creates obviously like you looking back at the past of a different kind of idea of what a city could look like to what it looks now. But the fact that when the glass sometimes shatters as well, it really emphasizes the illusion of it all, that we're sort of just agreeing almost that we're aware of the illusion, that it's artificial, that it's fake, but we still need it in some ways. Like with the door opening and closing, there's a part in the restaurant scene where someone breaks the main door into the place. And so instead, the doorman just holds the door handle and gives the illusion of opening and closing the door for customers. And they comply and thank him still. And I think it's such a brilliant way of emphasizing that we know it's kind of all fake or constructed, but yet we agree to it because maybe it also comes back to the idea of responsibility, that we're happy to kind of give up a sense of responsibility to be told what to do or how to move, so we don't have to think for ourselves.
Maybe that brings us to the third film that we're going to talk about, because I think here it manifests almost in its final form, which is the film After Hours from 1985 by Scorsese. This film it's kind of like a noir parody, I would say, of this office worker called Paul Hackett in, I believe, New York. And he is, sitting behind his desk, bored of life and, trying to search for a more exciting adventure. And as night falls, I don't know, does he make like a decision that leads him to this wild wilderness?
He makes the decision to go read his book in a cafe. I can't remember what for. And then he meets this woman that kind of kickstarts his journey. Right.
He goes to this cafe and he meets this cuckoo, crazy, insane, fantastic woman played by Rosanna Arquette, I believe. Yeah. And that sort of kickstarts a night that if you were to ever retell your friends, like, oh my God, guys, I went through the craziest thing past weekend, they would never believe. It's in and out of apartments, encounters, the weirdest people that, only come alive during the night, that shake him up so much that eventually he is yearning to go back to his desk and live his happiest life there. It's some time ago that I saw this film last, so you have to tell me what happens exactly during this night again.
Yeah, well, I think it all starts in the taxi. So he meets this woman in a cafe, and she kind of gives him her number for them to maybe meet later in the evening. And so when he goes back home, he kind of impulsively calls her at 11 at night, and she invites him over all the way down into Soho, which is like a very far away place from where he's staying. He's staying in Manhattan or somewhere further north. And on this taxi ride down, his single $20 note flies out of the window. And so he has no money left. And so already then he has to apologize to the taxi driver. But this is kind of the whole issue of why he can't get home, because he has no money to fund his travels. And he goes to the woman's apartment and meets an artist. And it's just all these very bizarre interactions. And he develops this idea in his head that the girl that he's come to see has these really horrific, gross burn scars on her body that he's too scared to see. And that kind of leaves him to leaving impromptly. And then he will come back later to find that she's actually killed herself through an overdose. And then he kind of internalizes this as his fault for abandoning her. And he then meets a series of other women who either throw themselves at him or, like you said, he gets stuck in this maze of returning to the same places. He goes to the apartment several times. He even ends up meeting the boyfriend of the dead woman, who happens to be the guy working behind a bar that's going to loan him money to get out of.
And then he leaves his keys at the bar or something dumb, right?
Yeah. So it's all these things. And kind of what I was saying in the cold open of like, Scorsese here is forcing you to pay attention to everything. And so then it's like how you can get stuck within that of, if you have to engage with everything that demands your attention, it becomes nightmarish, and it does feel like amazing. You can't escape. And he creates a very nice juxtaposition between that and just getting lost in your job, or like we've said before, of getting lost in the rhythms of life. But what's interesting about this film is that it's obviously very different to the rest of Scorsese's films. It's very surreal. It's very, you get lost in some kind of fever dream. And what's interesting is he was trying to make The Last Temptation of Christ before making this film. Yeah. And I think for whatever reason, they had to stop production, and they abandoned making the film, and this script got thrown at him, and it was like a completely different approach to making a film. It was much more hands-on, independent. They would try and like just do everything as quick as possible. And they shot it all at night. He really like let himself go of what his idea of filmmaking was or had been for him to then make this film. It's, again, if we look at now the 80s in which this is set in, what would you make of the period that this film is set in, and perhaps what it's trying to maybe point towards? This is now when we start maybe to enter into the sense of everything is heightened, or we are really slaves to our jobs at this point, I would say, within an urban city. I
forgot this $20 bill detail, but it's interesting that the film sort of challenges the idea that if you don't even have your $20 anymore, your life kind of falls apart, or that you really live a life of full chaos. And it shows it to you in a way that makes you really, I don't know, long for this normality. It's interesting how these walls that were first set up as either with Kurosawa as bureaucracy, and then with Tati as these walls of civilization, have now turned into this $20 bill, which I think is very telling for the time. What I like about it is that it's, I think, out of the three films, the funniest one.
Yeah.
It really is able to joke on all conventions that we have on what a man should be. I think especially for Scorsese, who is like, I don't know, the master of masculinity of the second half of the 20th century and even now. It's the Scorsese film that shows the most self-reflection in a way, because it also shows the facade of, the hero. Because this man, he's initially trying to be some sort of hero in like saving the situation, or like, being this, trying to hook up with this gorgeous girl and all these things. But you see that all of it really comes to crumbles if, you don't have money, you're not able to handle the situation by any means. Or if life just appears, the madness of life appears, it shows how none of it really matters anymore. None of it has any meaning.
He is nothing in the end. He is only but his job that he turns back to at the end of this whole adventure.
And maybe that also symbolizes the risk that comes with freedom, no? Because he chooses freedom for one night.
Yes.
And then immediately the world comes after him. So it comes back to this idea that we were discussing about what happens if you take responsibility for your own life that exists out of the system.
Or how hard that is to do within
for sure,
the city or the concrete city itself. To kind of like wrap up, but there's one film that I've also been thinking of, which is Perfect Days by Wim Wenders. And how that maybe now after this conversation, and also when we've spoken about it before, it's both been a film that we've loved, that maybe it almost fetishizes attention and how we see our lives. Because when we first watched it, we were kind of very much enamored with it. And then someone, a friend of yours in Japan, made the very obvious point that it's like kind of romanticizing the life of a toilet cleaner in Japan. And I mean, if that toilet cleaner in Japan was getting paid a good salary and was able to do these things that we see in the film, then maybe it's a realistic depiction. But maybe then with this film in mind, to kind of ask you, how do you see how bureaucracy or also like the routine of urban life is in film now? And do you still think, given what I said about cinema itself being sort of this practice of paying attention, it's still a useful tool in that, or that the fact that when the lights come on, we maybe already pick up our phone to see what we've missed, that it doesn't necessarily, it's more of an illusion of something rather than the actual thing itself?
Yeah, I think Perfect Days and the way our look on this film changed is like the prime example on how me and you and a lot of other people have sort of nestled into this comfort of life the way it exists. Like change or an alternative reality feels very far away. And I think it's mostly because it is very hard to imagine a life where people mobilize or where we think outside of the way life is structured now, the way it happens in Ikiru, for example. So I do think there is a bit of a lack of examples in modern day cinema or 21st century cinema that offer challenging ideas on how we can look at the future or how we can look at systems in a way that feels realistic, maybe. There is a light that still needs to come upon us. Because, yeah, Perfect Days, I think, is beautiful because it really gives you a fundamental understanding on how we need to shift our attention to beauty, to care in these small ways. But then the film is also so apolitical whilst dealing with a very political issue.
Yeah. Which makes sense given what Wim Wenders then went on to say.
As we know now. As we know now. So yeah, I would love to see a film that is tender in the same way, but also gives us some perspective on the future of systems.
I hope that this conversation, it's because obviously Tati's 6 films are showing now, but I hope this conversation kind of places his film within a larger conversation or a larger idea of what his films are trying to communicate and show, which clearly we need more of.
We need so much more of.
Stay connected with us at Celebrating Cinema and Lab by following @Lab111 on Instagram and Letterboxd. If you love what we do, support us by leaving a review on your favorite podcast platform. It really helps us climb the ranks of the podcast charts. This was a Lab 111 production, edited and produced by Elliot Bloom, and co-produced by myself, Laura Romans. Music comes from Hugo Emertsal, and the artwork is by Studio FFF.